So it was just, but it's also crazy because I've befriended a lot of actual Korean friends and everything, and they say our language is just hard. It's just very, very difficult. And I didn't realize that until like I tried to explain because I've met a couple of people who like their English was, I'd say, about a little bit below intermediate, and they would ask me like, "Hey, what did you just say?" or "How can you explain this?" Or they have problems with possession words using nouns, but like, and it's just mind-boggling how like I'm like, wow, that's like an easy concept for me to understand this, but for them it's like literally really hard for them to grasp why we use the, or how do we differentiate from a to and, or using adjectives and everything. So it was just well, that's one of the things that I take back with me, and are saying that is like our language is not easy. Our language is definitely not easy to the rest of the world.
That's number one reason why English is so difficult is because our context is it's made to move forward. We don't start off at the end
Hmm.
or at the middle of a story in order to explain something. And especially within the Spanish language, they suffer this a lot with explaining things backwards. Within the Asian community, they tend to start their stories in the middle in order for you to pretty much grasp at where they're going.
Hmm.
Like even their saying sometimes starts off in the middle, like save me face. It's like, I don't even know you. What do you mean save me face? It's like, but they can see
Yeah.
30 steps ahead of what goes into fruition from what's happening right in front of them. So that's why they use a lot of save me face. Within business, when somebody gives them the wrong amount of change, and it's like, come on, like don't insult me. Like don't look at me like if
Yes.
I don't know how to count. Like give me the right amount of change. But for us as Americans, firsthand using the English language, our thought is always forward. So even when we try to directly translate, I use Spanish because all my life I've met people from Latin America and all sorts of Spanish-speaking countries, and a
Hmm.
lot of them suffer that. You can't directly translate Spanish into English. I'll give you a perfect example. My father-in-law, he had mentioned, he had told my wife that she goes too far. In Spanish, that's a compliment.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds great, but in English, it's like sometimes you can't put that literally. We have our own sayings that explain exactly that, but you can't just say go too far because go too far means something else. So that's
Hmm.
another thing that goes into fruition. That's pretty messed up, but yeah, English will always be the number one business language for that reason. There's less misunderstandings, and our context is very complex that not everyone can grasp it. Well, that's actually one of the reasons why so many of us are conflicting now. Um, People come from so many foreign backgrounds that they try to use the mentality of their parents and think that it's going to function for themselves when they finally get educated
Yeah.
in college. And it doesn't work that way. You can't, you have to think forward. And by the time they realize that, they're already in their 30s. Half of their youth is gone. So that's why
Hmm.
it's really important to understand that the English language is meant to move forward. Second most important language in
Yes.
is Chinese because they're very firm with what they say. Sometimes they'll say two or three words, like I mentioned before, save me face. With that, it's like,
Hmm.
oh shit, like you're trying to disgrace this family. And they have many sayings like that within business that functions that Americans acknowledge. That's why Chinese is also another one that's vice versa. They've brought a lot of Chinese abroad so they can teach us more Mandarin.
Hearing you talking, all of a sudden it just like it chopped and then it froze for a second.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, it was just wild. As terms as the people in general, Koreans are probably some of the nicest people you'll ever meet. They were all cordial. As long as you just stay in your lane, you don't get in their lane. They're not, very confrontational people. The older population, I would say, is a little bit towards more like the racist sides because they're the older generation. They were there during the Korean War and all that. and
Yeah.
everything. But today's new generation, they're not like that. I'll give for example, cab drivers. So if you're black or you're dark skinned, if they see dark skin, good luck trying to try and wave down for a cab in the middle of Seoul. And I think a lot of times the cab drivers they'll see you and they'll just drive right back to you, and you'll go through, unless you're with a Korean national, unless they like the Korean national is the one that does the waving, or someone else of a different color does the waving. 9 times out of 10, the cab drivers are gonna zip right past you and not even blink an eye and everything, because to them they don't want to deal with that at all. Um, I remember that in case I was like blown away. We were at a bar hopping with a group of friends, and my friend was like, "All right, let's go to this town," and he's like waiting down for a cab, and this is when I first noticed that he was waiting down, and there was a whole bunch of cabs, just empty cabs, just like, and they would slow down and just like zoom right away. They slow down, zoom right away, and I was like, what the fuck's going on? And then my friend who was Korean, he was like, "Oh no, don't worry, I got this." And then he waves, and then boom, the first one automatically came picked up, and I was like, what was this shit about? Well, like, what the hell? And then he explained to me, and I was like, oh wow. I was like, I didn't realize that. That's crazy. I was like, yeah, Indian, dark skin, like any type of dark skin. They usually, if it's an older cab driver, he's just not gonna bother with it, because that's just he's in his ways and everything like that. If it's a younger cab driver, then normally they're okay, but the older ones, they're set in their ways from the old times.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've learned to just forgive the people that are that ignorant. No changes, because the truth is the youth is always going to be what's going to be the future. That's bottom line.
But
Rely
yes.
on the views of the youth, and the impact that we have on the youth is a very small percentage. That sometimes that connection has a large disconnect. That even at that, sometimes the youth still winds up learning the hard way that some of what they believe in is actually necessary to understand. But then there's the other side of the spectrum. We still have to respect the fact that you guys are still learning, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there's a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
that you guys are learning that are very useful. I'll give you an example, like what I mentioned earlier. When we were trying to start the Zoom chat, this is a gentleman that's about 56, 57 years old. It took him an hour and a half to get his stuff together to get on Zoom. It took you 7 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
If you use that in every single aspect of comprehension and um, Q&A or response, or being capable of a certain skill, that's productivity right there in the world. If most of the youth can get on board of being that efficient, we're gonna be okay. I'll be honest. There's sometimes it worries me that sometimes the younger generations, they go ahead and take on the sound bite and go on and believe into the loaded questions.
Mm-hmm.
But there are times that sometimes they can smell bullshit, so which is still good. So it still shows signs that there is progress. Sometimes you might hear that the older generation is going to sound frustrated, but truth is we still rely on the youth to create a good future for this country and the world. And there's a lot at hand. There's a lot at stake. We have everything to lose. So you guys have the weight on
Yeah.
your shoulders, but I like the fact that now this generation that's coming up now is kind of taking it with stride, like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. It's like, okay, good. I just hope you guys stay that focused and things will be.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. So the city of Seoul, and a lot of people call me crazy for it, because I actually have a couple of friends that were from New York too, and some agree, some are like, "Nah, you're crazy, man." But some parts of Seoul, because Seoul is a huge city now. Seoul, think of Seoul as of, how New York has boroughs, Manhattan, Brooklyn, and everything. Like, it's picture Seoul as that. Just because you say I'm going to Seoul, they're gonna be like, "Where are you gonna go? You want to go to Gangnam? You want to go to Itaewon? You want to go to Hongdae?" Like, it has its own little communities and everything in it. And it's basically, I felt like I was at home. As weird as that sounds, I was in like over 5,000 miles away from America, from my family, from everything that I know, and I felt like I was at home. It reminded me 100% of New York in every aspect, in every single way, from the subways, from the city life, from the people, everything. Like I legitimately felt like I was in New York for a year. I pictured it as like a futuristic Chinatown times 50 because of its size and everything. But like it everything about that city just reminded me of New York and just the atmosphere of what New York gave me and everything. Every single time I go down over there and go to Times Square, Manhattan, and everything like that. I loved taking. I mean, I didn't have to drive anywhere, but it's the same as New York. You can just take the subway literally any like you can take a subway from the tippy top of the South Korean border all the way down to the end where you go take a ferry to Jeju. Like there's no need for a car at all whatsoever. Everything is by trains, and they have even speed trains and not the bullet train like Japan, but you can get to these places at efficient times and everything. The businesses out there are the same. You have the panhandlers. You have, I mean, there's everything over there. It's just crazy. It's I can't even like I said, like to me, it just felt like I was living in New York for a year. Like that's what it felt like to me.
Oh, that's great. It goes to show how much of an influence New York has on the world. As
Yeah.
crazy as that sounds, since forever, America is the place that people strive to be more like because so much of its rules, its societies, its communities, it functions. I mean, we have some of the best traffic laws that there are, and in fact, we're the example of where traffic laws function well. Talking about that, how is traffic out?
And that's another thing too. That's another thing. That's where I was gonna get at, and this is why I say it's like New York. So if you think, or if anybody that lives in New York and hears this, if you think driving in New York is crazy, is the worst place in America, I'm sorry to inform you, but New York is nothing compared to driving in Korea. The times that I did have to drive, when I had to drive military vehicles or drive the ambulance, being a medic, I had to take them to the hospital and everything. If I had to teach someone how to drive from America, I would take them to Korea and make them take a license test in Korea. And if they pass that, then I would have 100% faith they could drive anywhere in the U.S.
Wow.
Hands down. The Koreans, they have no sense of direction. They have no sense of lane changing. They have no sense of space. They have, and we're talking not just cars. These buses have no sense. These tractor trailers have no. It doesn't matter what. They will go right by through you like your Swiss cheese if you're not careful. They have tons of accidents all the time. I mean, there's and they drive like so. There's a saying, right? When you get in a cab and you're trying to go somewhere fast in Korea, you tell a cab driver where you're going and you say Bali Bali. And that tells a cab driver, I need you to get me to there as fast as possible. And he will get you there as fast as possible. Regardless if it's 7 o'clock in the morning, rush hour traffic, regardless if it's 1 o'clock in the morning when there's no traffic, he will go over 100 in that highway just for you.
Wow. That's insane.
And he will do tricks that you have never even seen or even would dream about doing in your own car. Because I'm a speedster too. I will admit I will be the first one to admit my mom hates it. I speed in my vehicle too, and Gabriel does it too. We're just natural born speeders, but they're the things that they did, and the thing I don't think I would have the courage to be like, oh yeah, I can squeeze through that little crevice right there. I can squeeze. No, hell no, hell no.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Forget it and forget it. What's that? It's like if you're trying to leave New York at 5 p.m. Go through the Lincoln Tunnel or what's the bridge that gets always crowded. Uh, uh, I think it's on the bridge to Brooklyn or something like that. One of the
Verzano?
main. What happened?
The Verzano?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. How it just gets clogged. Uh, okay, so like at least New York still has other avenues and routes. Like there's certain areas in Korea where it's just this highway and that's all you got.